killing a police officer is a heinous crime. However, Alan Lyon, the detective inspector of the Oaktown Police Department's Serious Crime Unit, was brutally murdered by a gang just 2 months after the death of his wife and daughter in a car accident. His body was never found. I was stunned when I heard the news, because just half an hour ago, I ran into him in the underground parking lot. Alan was dead for 7 days. When the forensic officers arrived at the scene, the entire living room was covered in dark purple bloodstains that had already solidified. On the walls, on the sofa, on the floor. The furniture in the house was in a mess, with traces of slashing and chopping everywhere, apparently after a fierce fight. However, after a detailed investigation of the scene, the forensic officers only found a severed little finger under the coffee table and did not find Alan's body. After DNA comparison by the forensic doctor, it was confirmed that the blood and severed finger in the house belonged to Alan. And based on the amount of blood at the scene, it was inferred that Alan was killed, and the time of death was 7 days ago. It was the morning after the murder was discovered when I received the news. But I still couldn't believe it was true, because just half an hour ago I had seen Alan in the underground parking lot. He was leaning against the corner smoking, looking preoccupied, and when he saw me driving by, he waved to me anxiously. I thought he was coming to the police station to report on his work and was in a hurry to go to a meeting. So I just said, "See you in the office later," and didn't pay much attention to it. But now, looking at the photos of the scene from the computer and the forensic identification report, I instantly felt a tightness in the back of my head, as if someone was pulling my scalp. Dead 7 days ago. Then, who did I just see? The more I thought about it, the more terrified I became. As a detective, I should be a firm materialist and shouldn't believe in the existence of ghosts. But what I had just experienced, as well as the murder information on the computer, made me feel hairy all over. Especially after watching the surveillance video of the underground parking lot, it was even more creepy. Not only because the position Alan was standing in at the time was a blind spot for the surveillance, the strangest thing was that none of the cameras captured Alan entering or leaving the police station underground parking lot. Phew. After watching the surveillance, I collapsed in my chair, breathing heavily, my heart pounding. Before I could recover, there was a knock on the door of the office. The knock startled me, and I turned my head to see Lucas Miller, a colleague who had just been transferred, walking in. "Inspector Frank, the chief wants you in the conference room." "Hey, Inspector, your face. Didn't you sleep well?" I'll be right there," I responded vaguely, because no one would believe I had just seen Alan. Lucas nodded and turned to leave. I picked up the mirror on the table, and the me in the mirror was pale, my hair standing on end. I shook my head, hard, took a few deep breaths, and after calming myself down, I walked out of the office. In the conference room, the chief's face was very bad, and the expressions of the others were not very good either. Seeing me coming in, the chief beckoned. "Have you read the information?" "Yes." I nodded, feeling inexplicably sad when I thought about Alan's murder. Alan was not only the detective inspector of the Oaktown Police Department's Serious Crime Unit, but also my old classmate from the police academy. Talented, motivated, upright, and tough. But it was precisely because he was too tough and inflexible that his career was not going well. After all these years, I had become the head of the state police serious crime unit, and he was still a detective inspector in a small-town police station, not even a deputy chief. The chief slammed the table and said, "Seriously, the criminals are too rampant. Now, they don't take us police seriously at all." This time, the murder of Detective Inspector Alan Ryan of the Eerie Town Police Department is a wake-up call, seriously illustrating that our supervision is not in place. Inspector Frank, the state government leaders, and I have discussed and decided that you will personally lead a team to Oak Town to investigate and solve the case, carry out a comprehensive crackdown on criminal crimes, and organize special struggle operations. As the head of the Grand State Police Serious Crime Unit, I knew what a serious crime it was to kill a police officer, so I knew even better the determination of the state government and the state police to crack down on organized crime in Oak Town. This time, after a day of discussion, arrangement, and deployment, I didn't get off work until late at night. Thinking that I would be going to Oak Town tomorrow to start the investigation, I hurried to the underground garage. As soon as I entered the underground parking lot, the feeling of silence instantly reminded me of the scene of seeing Alan in the morning. My whole back felt cold, and my breathing became short. I coughed loudly on purpose and walked towards the parking space, looking around all the way with lingering fear. When I got in the car, I quickly closed the door. But as soon as the car started, I heard a harsh alarm from the radar on the central control screen. I turned my head and instantly broke out in a cold sweat. "Who?" I shouted and looked towards the white window. On the right side of the vehicle was a wall, and there was no one there. But the central control screen still made a beep radar, a line, and the picture clearly showed a standing figure on the right side of the vehicle, and looking at his movements, it seemed that he was opening the door of the co-pilot. The strange and eerie picture made my scalp tingle. Without thinking about it, I slammed on the gas pedal and fled the underground parking lot like crazy. When I got home, I was still in shock. I gurgled a few mouthfuls of water, immediately went to the bedroom, took out the Bible from the bedside table, and began to pray. Catherine, my wife, was playing with her mobile phone on the sofa, saw it, and asked, strangely, "Honey, what's wrong? How did you think of praying today?" I told her what happened to Alan, and my wife's face instantly darkened. She walked over to me without saying a word, took my hand, and prayed with me. My wife, Catherine, is a devout Catholic. Although I am a policeman, I have never interfered too much with my wife's beliefs based on the concept of freedom of belief. However, today, I am more grateful than ever that I have a religious wife. Whether prayer works or not, at least it is psychologically comforting. About 20 minutes later, after we finished praying, my wife got up, took out a cross pendant from the drawer, and handed it to me. "Put it on, and don't take it off, except when you shower." "Frank, you've run into evil." "What do you mean?" "Alan is following me." "What is he following me for?" My wife said you and Alan were classmates, both working in the police station, and you were his superior. Now that he is dead, there must be a grievance. He is following you. That is, he wants you to help him clear his name. "Really? She?" I gasped, feeling my scalp tingle and tighten, and asked timidly, "Can you see Alan?" Then can you ask Alan what his grievance is? Who killed him? I will help him get justice, so he doesn't have to follow me all the time. My wife rolled her eyes. Honey, if I could see Alan's soul, would I need you to wear a cross? Then he said he died unjustly. Intuition, if there is no grievance, why would he run to the state police station to find you just after the 7th day after his death? The police station is full of evil spirits, and ordinary ghosts dare not approach it unless they have resentment in their hearts. Then why did he wait for me in the underground parking lot instead of going directly to the office? I asked again. Because the underground parking lot is full of yen, my wife said as she pushed me to the bathroom. Okay, go take a shower and get rid of the bad luck. Pack up and go to work tomorrow. Try to give Alan justice as soon as possible. You have to let go, and he has to rest in peace. All night, I was in a state of half asleep and half awake, always feeling that Alan was standing by the bed, secretly watching, as if he would appear at any time. Early the next morning, I did as my wife said and prayed at the door. Before going out, merciful Lord, please forgive those sinners, guide them to the light, and let Alan's soul rest in peace. I will do my best, investigate the truth, and give him justice. After praying, I immediately rushed to the state police, serious crime unit, and gathered more than a dozen elite police officers to Oaktown. As soon as I arrived, I immediately started working. I first found Benjamin Parker, the forensic director, who was at the scene. Dr. Parker, I am Frank Williams of the State Police Serious Crime Unit, in charge of investigating the murder of Detective Inspector Alan. Can you repeat the situation at the scene? Benjamin said lukewarmly, Inspector Williams, haven't all the files been handed over? Well, but I want to know how you determined that Alan was killed, not kidnapped. I stared at Benjamin without blinking, because the biggest doubt in the whole case is Alan's body disappeared. Assuming that Alan was really retaliated by the gang for investigating the case, then why did they move Alan's body? They dared to break into the house and murder, and they took great pains to destroy the body, which is illogical, unless it was to cover up the stench of the corpse and delay the discovery of the murder. But it's winter. No. Just to delay the discovery of the murder, turning the air conditioner to cooling mode is far less risky than moving the body. Under my scrutinizing gaze, Benjamin said lightly, a normal-sized adult should have a blood volume of about 4,500 ml. When the blood loss reaches 20 of the total blood volume at one time, shock will occur, which is life-threatening. If the blood loss at one time exceeds 2,000, clinical death may occur. According to our investigation of the scene, Detective Inspector Aaron's blood loss exceeded 1,500 ml. Considering Detective Inspector Allen's thin body, we can be sure that Detective Inspector Allen has been killed. I immediately asked, is there such a possibility that the gangster only injured Detective Inspector Allen at the time, causing him to lose a lot of blood? Afterwards, the gangster, for some reason, transferred the seriously injured Detective Inspector Allen for treatment and restricted his personal freedom. Benjamin shook his head. That's impossible. First of all, after the murder was discovered, we also investigated the recent blood use records of the county blood bank and major hospitals. and found no abnormalities. Secondly, making such a big fuss and taking risks to save people. What are they trying to do? After speaking, Benjamin raised the scalpel in his hand. Inspector Williams, I have a body to dissect, so I won't see you off. After leaving the technical department, I took someone to the Oaktown police station. On the way, Lucas said indignantly, Inspector, the forensic doctor just now didn't give you any face. Not only did he speak in a strange way, but he also looked impatient. I think he must have a problem. I glared at him. Lucas, it's a big taboo in our line of work to suspect colleagues without reason. I don't want to hear such words that are not conducive to unity again. Lucas said indignantly, even if you criticize me, I still have to say it. The one who was killed was the detective inspector of their police station's serious crime unit. For this reason, the state government and the state police department deployed a special operation just to crack down on gangsters under umbrellas. The police station's detective inspector's wife and daughter had a car accident first, and then he was killed in his own home, and it was not discovered until 7 days later. If you say that the Oaktown police station has no problem, I wouldn't believe it if I died. Enough, even if there is a problem, there must be evidence. I stopped Lucas's muttering, and I felt something was wrong in my heart. Weird. As Lucas said, Alan is also the detective inspector of the Oaktown police station's serious crime unit. Even if he has a bad temper and bad popularity, it is not impossible for him to be found dead after 7 days, right? As a public official, he didn't go to work for 7 days, and no one asked. I sat in the car, pondering with a stomach full of doubts, and silently looked ahead. Originally, I thought I would find clues when I arrived at the Oaktown police station, but I didn't expect to hit another snag. David Brown, the police chief and deputy head of the serious crime unit, went to the state capitol yesterday to attend an emergency meeting. I won't be back for a few days. Hearing this news, I couldn't help but suspect that David was deliberately avoiding us. After all, the state government and the state police department just deployed a special operation yesterday morning to crack down on gangs, evil forces, and umbrellas in Oaktown. In the afternoon, David went to the state capitol for a meeting. Is it such a coincidence? But why is he hiding? Is it because Alan's death is related to him, or is there really some important meeting? Although David was not there, the work still had to continue. I found Kevin Johnson, a detective in the serious crime unit of the Oaktown Police Department, and also Alan's deputy, and after asking him in detail about the whole case, I felt mixed emotions. According to Kevin, Alan was suspended internally a month ago. When I asked about the specific reason for Alan's suspension, Kevin hesitated for a long time before saying Alan had a mental problem after the car accident of his wife and daughter.
What kind of problem?
I asked relentlessly. 2 months ago, Alan's wife and daughter had a car accident. Considering his special status, the traffic department and our serious crime unit jointly investigated and found out that it was just an ordinary traffic accident. But Alan stubbornly believed that the case he was investigating was too involved and that he was being retaliated against. Even though we showed him all the evidence, he still didn't believe it. In the end, he was dissatisfied with the prosecutor's decision not to prosecute the perpetrator. He complained many times, saying that some of us were harboring criminals and acting as umbrellas for evil forces. Speaking of this, Kevin's face didn't look very good, and his words were full of dissatisfaction, making things difficult for one's own people all day long, looking at everyone as if they were criminal suspects. Who can stand it? Because of Alan's endless complaints, everyone's life is not easy. For this reason, the mayor and Chief David also talked to him many times. He, on the other hand, would talk to anyone insisting that someone wanted to harm him. In the end, there was no other way but to suspend him first, so that we could have some peace and quiet, and he could adjust his mentality. After listening to Kevin's statement, my mind became confused for a while. Who should I believe? According to Kevin, Alan's wife and daughter died in a traffic accident, but Alan believed it was retaliation, and the next target of those people was him. Combined with the current situation, Alan was indeed persecuted. Assuming that Alan's previous actions were not mentally abnormal, then the question arises, what case was Alan working on before the car accident of his wife and daughter? And what kind of major case could make him suspicious of the entire leadership of Oaktown? Thinking of this, I couldn't help but sigh. The water in Oaktown is too deep, and with my personal energy, I can't complete the special operations deployed by the state government and the state police. Maybe if I continue to investigate, I may follow in Alan's footsteps at any time. But if I don't investigate, then Alan's ghost will always follow me. Just as I was feeling uneasy, Kevin suddenly said, "Inspector Williams, I heard that you and Alan are classmates in the police academy and good friends. Did he contact you before his death?" Oh. I, who came from a criminal investigation background, was investigating and handling cases, and my nerves were extremely sensitive. To be ashamed, although Alan and I were classmates and had a good relationship in the past, we haven't been in touch much recently. Except for occasional meetings at work, we have no personal contact. If it weren't for the fact that Alan's murder had caused such a big commotion, I wouldn't even know that his wife and daughter had a car accident. As for the case that Alan handled before his death, I don't know anymore. But hearing Kevin's words, I immediately responded, ambiguously, occasionally, on the phone. It's all personal. Why Detective Johnson wants to know the content. No, just asking casually. After Kevin finished speaking, he suddenly lowered his voice. "Inspector Williams, I know you are here with a mission, and you have a good personal relationship with Alan. I don't know whether I should say something. I don't know the specifics. Really. Anyway, that's what people outside are saying. It is rumored that the reason why Alan is holding on to the case of Golden Lion Finance's violent debt collection is because Golden Lion's recent momentum has been too strong, resulting in a large number of customers lost by Silver Moon Finance. And everyone is saying that Alan's daughter can go to Europe, studying abroad for gilding, and starting a company when I come back. Is all the strong support of Silver Moon Finance behind it." And Kevin said in a lower voice, "Now the police station is saying that Alan's death is related to Golden Lion Finance. Those loan sharks have no humanity." Really then, after the murder was discovered, did Detective Johnson investigate Golden Lion Finance? I asked, meaningfully. I originally planned to summon Oliver Golden, the boss of Golden Lion Finance. But as soon as the case was reported, you came. Now that the state police decided that Inspector Williams, you will personally supervise the case, we are not good at interfering. After Kevin finished speaking, he got up and walked out, saying as he walked, "Now that Chief David is not here, I will be in charge of all the big and small things in the police station. Inspector Williams, you are busy first. If you have anything, please call me anytime." Looking at Kevin's back, I couldn't help but fall into deep thought. Is there really something wrong with Alan? Kevin is a detective in the serious crime unit of the Oaktown police station, and he knew what mission I came here with. So what he just said was deliberately told to me. And that's the problem. Kevin knew my relationship with Alan and deliberately told me the so-called rumors. Without conclusive evidence, apart from discrediting himself, it would not have any changing effect on this special operation. Moreover, the police station handles cases all have procedures. What cases Alan handled before his death, you can find out by checking the files. Thinking of this, I immediately gave Lucas and George tasks, asking them to lead people to retrieve files and summon Oliver Gordon, the boss of Golden Lion Finance Company, respectively. About an hour later, Lucas came in with a thick file. "Inspector, I found it all. It's similar to what Kevin said. Most of the cases of usury and violent debt collection injuries in Oaktown in the past 2 years were supervised by Alan, and most of the cases were finally characterized as fights and ended in mediation. She did follow the victims." Really? I frowned even more, feeling that something was wrong, but I couldn't tell. Just then the phone rang. It was George calling. As soon as I answered, George's anxious voice came from the receiver. "Inspector, someone is dead. Oliver Gordon is dead." Hearing the news of Oliver Gordon's death, my face was very ugly, and Lucas next to me asked curiously, "Inspector, is there something wrong?" With a sullen face, I thought quickly, and soon said to Lucas, "Lucas, you take someone to Silver Moon Finance now and summon Samuel White." "Yes." After Lucas left, I immediately found Kevin, Detective Johnson. "Oliver Gordon is dead. What do you think?" Kevin's expression was obviously taken aback, and he quickly said, "Now that someone has died, our serious crime team must go to the scene. Inspector Williams, why don't I go with you?" "Okay, let's go." I took Kevin and the police officers from the Oaktown technical section and went straight to the scene. Oliver Gordon died in his own villa. When we arrived at the scene, George had already blocked the gate of the villa with a cordon, and there were several fierce-looking young people inside. I strode towards George to report the situation. George said, "Inspector, when we arrived at Golden Lion Finance, they said their boss didn't go to work today. I took someone to Oliver Gordon's house." Speaking, George pointed to the detained gangsters. According to the confessions of these gangsters, after Oliver Gordon got drunk last night, he never left the house. And Oliver Gordon has a habit, that is, no one is allowed to enter his bedroom. So, although Oliver Gordon hadn't come out for more than 10 hours, they didn't dare to knock on the door. Until we came over and found Oliver Gordon dead in the bedroom. And through preliminary judgment, Oliver Gordon, the cause of death. Speaking of Oliver Gordon's death, George's face was a little abnormal, and his words paused. "What was the cause of death?" Kevin asked urgently. George glanced at me, and after my acquiescence, he said truthfully. The expression was terrified and distorted, as if scared to death. "Scared to death? This? How is it possible?" Kevin's face changed slightly. In fact, after hearing the cause of Oliver Gordon's death, Not only Kevin's expression changed, but I also shuddered, because I saw Alan with my own eyes. Twice. Could it be that Oliver Gordon's death was related to Alan's ghost? Did Alan's ghost come back for revenge? Just when I was struggling, George said to himself, "It's not that I was scared to death. I'm also wondering, logically speaking, these loan sharks are all gangsters. They shouldn't be so timid. Why are they so scared to death?" Okay, let's investigate the scene first. I waved my hand and walked towards the bedroom with the police officers from the Oaktown Technical Section. In the bedroom, a burly middle-aged man was lying on the carpet in a very strange posture. His hands were kept in an upward grasping posture. The veins on the back of his hands were exposed. His expression was terrified, especially those eyes, which were wide open, as if he had seen something extremely horrifying before he died. I carefully observed the surroundings and found that except for the mess around Oliver Gordon's body on the carpet, everything else in the bedroom was still in order, and there were no signs of fighting. This is strange. There was no sign of fighting. Why did Oliver Gordon show that kind of death? Could it be that the murderer cleaned up the crime scene after committing the crime? But I soon dismissed the possibility, because according to the confessions of Oliver Gordon's gangsters, since Alan's wife and daughter had a car accident 2 months ago, Oliver Gordon had a very unhappy relationship with Samuel White. For safety reasons, not only did he send his family out of town, but he also carried 7 or 8 men with him. Even if he came back to rest, he had to have his men on duty downstairs and patrol upstairs every half an hour. Although they couldn't enter the bedroom, they could hear what was going on inside next to the bedroom. But they didn't notice anything unusual last night. When asked why they didn't knock on the door, when Oliver Gordon didn't come out this morning, the gangsters said, "This is already commonplace." Because in the past, Oliver Gordon often took drugs and got high and didn't go out until midnight. Could it be death from drug overdose? I always feel that this is impossible. First of all, for a drug addict, most of them have a good grasp of the dosage, and there are few cases of death from overdose. Secondly, after taking drugs and hallucinating, there will be obvious weird behaviors. At least it will make a lot of noise, and it is impossible for the gangsters downstairs not to hear it. And the bedroom will not be so clean. It's man-made. It must be premeditated. Murder. It's just that the murderer's modus operandi is too secretive, and further detailed investigation is needed. I kept hinting to myself in my head. But soon, with Benjamin's preliminary examination of Oliver Gordon's body, the result I least wanted to see still appeared. Benjamin walked out of the bedroom, took off his gloves, and said, based on the preliminary judgment of the corpse spots and corpse stiffness, the time of death of the victim should be between 10 and 15 hours ago. The specific time of death needs to be taken back for further inspection. I nodded, and a strange feeling that lingered in my heart came to my mind again, and then I said to Benjamin, "Then, Doctor, Parker will work hard tonight. I need to know the exact time of death as soon as possible." As a veteran criminal investigator for more than 10 years, I also have some knowledge about the confirmation of the time of death. After death, the blood circulation stops, and the blood in the blood vessels moves to the lower part of the body. Due to gravity, it accumulates in the capillaries and small veins, causing them to dilate and shows purple spots through the skin, which are called corpse spots. Corpse spots appear as early as 30 minutes after death and usually begin to appear 1–2 hours after death. Without external force, the formation and development of corpse spots can be divided into accumulation period, diffusion period, and infiltration period. The initial stage of corpse spot formation is called the accumulation period. This period becomes clearly visible within 5–6 hours after death and can last for 6–12 hours. If the corpse spots in the accumulation period are pressed, the corpse spots will fade or disappear. If the pressure is stopped, the corpse spots will reappear. If the position of the corpse is changed before this stage, the corpse spots will also change and reappear to the new lower part. The second stage of the development of corpse spots is the diffusion period. It takes about 8 hours to develop from death to the diffusion period, and it lasts for 26–32 hours. During this period, the plasma stained red by hemoglobin infiltrates the surrounding tissues. At this time, pressing the corpse spots can no longer completely disappear, but only fades slightly. It takes a long time for the corpse spots to return to their original color after the pressure is stopped. When the position of the corpse is changed, some corpse spots may be displaced, while others remain in their original positions. The third stage of the development of corpse spots is that the infiltration time into the tissue is longer. During this period, the color of the corpse spots will not change or disappear when pressed with fingers, and the corpse spots will no longer move when the position of the corpse is changed. Some poisoned corpse spots are peculiar in color. They are bright red in carbon monoxide, poisony, cherry red in oxide, poisony, gray-brown in nitrite, and potassium chloride, poisoning, and red in death from freezing. Corpse stiffness refers to after a person dies, the muscles relax for a while, and then quickly become stiff, which is corpse stiffness. The joints are difficult to bend, and the state at the time of death is fixed. Corpse stiffness appears as early as 30 minutes after death, usually 2–3 hours after death. Some muscles begin to stiffen 6–8 hours throughout the body and peak at 12–15 hours. This state lasts for 24–36 hours and then begins to ease. Corpse stiffness gradually disappears in 2–3 days in summer, 3–4 days in spring and autumn, and 3–7 days in winter. Therefore, from the first glance of Oliver Gordon's body, I guessed that his approximate time of death was around midnight last night. However, I don't want to admit it, because I don't believe in ghosts in this world, even if I saw Alan's ghost with my own eyes. Therefore, I need Benjamin to perform a detailed autopsy on Oliver Gordon's body to see if he can find out the real cause of death. Benjamin said lukewarmly, "Got it. Send the body over after the on-site evidence collection is over, and the autopsy report will be issued tomorrow noon at the latest." After watching Benjamin leave, Kevin and I stood side by side in the hall of Oliver Gordon's villa, quietly waiting for other investigation results. After about half an hour or so, a police officer from the Oaktown Technical Section came out. Inspector Williams, Detective Johnson. I found some fingerprints at the scene, and after preliminary analysis, in addition, I also found some hair which needs to be taken back for further testing. No other clues. I asked. The police officer shook his head. No footprints other than the deceased were found. Hey, I sighed and winked my hand, signaling him to send Oliver Gordon's body to the technical department. On the way back, Kevin and I were in the same car, both worried and silent. Seeing that we were approaching the serious crime unit, Kevin suddenly said, "There's something wrong with Oliver Gordon's death." I glanced at Kevin, thinking to myself, this is nonsense. With so many gangsters protecting him, he died in the bedroom. This method, which is equivalent to a secret room murder case, can be seen to be problematic by anyone. Kevin's expression was strange. He struggled for a while, and then he stammered. I heard that after Alan was suspended, he kept yelling crazy that he would not let them go, even if he became a ghost. Now, Inspector Williams, what do you think it would be like if Alan came back for revenge? I heard it. I heard it again. This Kevin always likes to make excuses to shirk responsibility. To be honest, I don't like people like that. I glared at him and reprimanded Detective Johnson. You and I are both public officials. How can you believe in such weird things? But I am. Kevin raised his voice sharply and soon saw that both George, who was driving, and I looked at him, and then he held back the rest of his words. Kevin didn't say another word until he returned to the police station. I know Kevin has something on his mind, and he has something to say. Therefore, after returning, I went to Kevin's office alone and asked earnestly, Detective Johnson, I saw you hesitating to speak when you came back. Is there anything you want to say? Kevin shook his head. No. I said, seriously, Detective Johnson, I hope you think about it carefully. Now, I am representing the state government and the state police to investigate and supervise the murder of Detective Inspector Allen in Oaktown. Now, there is another case. In the case, if you conceal it, is to confront the investigation, and you'll be punished. Kevin said, unconvinced Inspector Williams, don't use the state police to pressure me. I can't say some things even if I say them. No one will believe me. Hearing this, a flash of inspiration flashed in my mind, as if I guessed what Kevin was going to say next, and couldn't help asking, you want to say, Alan? You didn't see Alan, did you? Huh? Kevin was taken aback. How do you know? The day before yesterday, the night before yesterday, when I got off work and went back, I saw Alan coming out of the police station from a long distance away. I saw it for real. But when I chased after him, he disappeared again. I was so scared that I immediately went back to check the surveillance. There was no one in the surveillance screen except me. Later I thought maybe it was because I was under too much work pressure recently and I had hallucinations. Kevin rubbed his temples, his face gloomy. Seeing that he wanted to say more, I hurriedly waved my hand. Okay, pretend I didn't ask about this. It would be a bad influence for two detectives to discuss ghosts in broad daylight. Just as I was about to leave Kevin's office, the phone on the desk rang. Kevin picked up the phone, but after hearing a few words, his face changed. After hanging up the phone, Kevin dragged me out without saying a word and said, as he walked, someone died again. A fisherman found Samuel White's body while fishing, and the nearby patrolman has gone to protect the scene. Inspector Williams, you also take your people. Let's go and have a look. After hearing Kevin's words, I was stunned. Dead. Samuel White is also dead. 2 murders in less than a day, both involving figures involved in Alan's murder. Was this a deliberate murder to confront the investigation and destroy evidence? Or was it, as Kevin said, Alan who died in vain turned into an evil ghost for revenge. With a stomach full of doubts and anxiety, I rushed to the scene with Kevin. However, when I saw Samuel White, who was caught in a fishing net by the fishermen who were fishing with a net, wrapped in an iron net, covered with lead blocks, dead with his eyes open, all the anxiety and uneasiness disappeared instantly. This is definitely not an evil ghost revenge, because if a ghost wanted to kill someone, it would be impossible to stuff someone into an iron net and sink it in the river. Only people kill people, and they will think of destroying corpses and destroying traces to hide their criminal evidence. If it was murder, then could Alan still be alive? Or rather, Alan never died in the first place. What a house full of blood. What a severed finger left behind. But it was a trap he deliberately laid out in order to fake his own death. But there's one thing I can't figure out: if Alan faked his death on purpose, why did he go to the state police to find me? I was deep in thought when Kevin suddenly pushed me. Inspector. Huh. I came back to my senses, only to see Kevin pointing at the fishermen beside me and motioning to me. They were the ones who caught the deceased while casting a net. Look, take them back and record their statements first. If there is no problem, let them go back. By the way, call Benjamin and ask him to come over to deal with the body. I need to know the exact time of Samuel White's death. After finishing speaking, I led the police officers both from the state police station and hurried back to the Oaktown police station. When I went back, I immediately gave George Lucas and others a task: find Alan at all costs. Lucas was taken aback. Inspector, isn't Alan dead? Is he really dead? I said, my guess, judging from the clues we have so far, Alan's death is full of uncertainty. First of all, the Oaktown police station did not find Alan's body. Even the confirmation of Alan's death, it was also inferred by Dr. Benjamin through the amount of blood loss at the scene of the crime. George asked, you suspect the doctor? Benjamin cooperated with the crime and deliberately gave a false identification report. This possibility is not ruled out. I nodded and then said, of course, it is also possible that the blood really belonged to Alan. But don't forget, blood can be preserved by technical means. Suppose Alan, after a period of time, regularly draws a certain amount of his own blood, supplemented by nutrients, stores it until there is enough blood, and then uses self-amputation to forge the crime scene. Is not impossible. What's the point of him doing this? Lucas asked first. Seeing their dubious looks, I sighed and shook my head. I don't know. Maybe after we find Alan, everything will come to light. Now, all the evidence that can prove Alan's death is a severed finger and a pool of blood. Apart from this, there is no evidence that can prove that Alan was killed. And these two pieces of evidence can be overturned. So you have to start from the source and check all the surveillance cameras along the way from the last time Alan appeared to his disappearance. Remember, we must see people alive, and we must see corpses when they die. After assigning the task, it was already night. As I walked out of the Oaktown police station, I saw Kevin standing by a Ford pickup, waving to me from afar. Inspector Williams worked hard. The accommodation has been arranged. Let's go. I'll take you there. I glanced at the car, high-end F-150, and said casually, Detective Johnson has a good car. Kevin laughed dryly twice. My son gave it to me. I can't afford this thing with my salary. Your precious son is now engaged in do a little business. Kevin responded vaguely and opened the door of the co-pilot. On the way to the hotel, the two of us chatted casually until we entered the best hotel in town. Kevin sent me to the elevator entrance and suddenly said with a serious face, "Inspector Williams, I suspect Alan is not dead." Huh. One. I pretended to be calm. Kevin hurriedly pulled me aside, lowered his voice and said, "Actually, when I was investigating the scene, the day before yesterday, I suspected that the scene was faked, but I wasn't sure. It wasn't until I saw Samuel White's body just now. It must have been someone. The case and Alan." Kevin looked around, saw no one around, and then continued. "After Alan's wife and daughter had a car accident, someone saw Alan entering Silver Moon Finance, and it was said that he had an argument with Samuel White. He started it. Afterwards, Alan threatened to kill Samuel White several times, but until he was suspended, he was unable to touch. So I suspect that Alan deliberately faked his death in order to create a murder." "Then why didn't you say it before?" I asked. Kevin sighed. "I wasn't sure before. Now that Samuel White and Oliver Gordon are dead, one after another, I can't think of anyone other than Alan and Oaktown who would dare to attack them. To be honest, Samuel White, he and Oliver Gordon are local snakes in Eurotown. They have a wide network, many gangsters, and ruthless attacks. Ordinary people want to touch them both, and they probably won't even be able to get close. Really, then, we have to investigate this matter carefully." I laughed, but I was extra vigilant in my heart. Kevin just said, "Samuel White and Oliver Gordon are dead one after another. How did you determine that Samuel White died before Oliver Gordon?" As a criminal investigator, 2 murder cases were discovered one after another, and it is impossible to make such a low-level slip of the tongue without knowing the time of death. And also, since Kevin also suspected that Alan was faking his death, why didn't he say it when we first arrived, but he took the initiative to speak out after Samuel White's body was found, and he saw me getting suspicious? Unless he knew Alan was faking his death. Perhaps he is also part of this plan to confront investigations and destroy evidence. Although the short chat made me suspicious of Kevin, I still had to appease him before there was conclusive evidence. "How about this? Detective Johnson, it's getting late. Let's talk about the case tomorrow," Kevin said with a dry smile. "See you tomorrow. Inspector Williams, take a good rest." After watching Kevin leave, I got on the elevator with a heavy heart, took a simple wash, and lay on the bed, tossing and turning, unable to fall asleep. In just one day, 2 murders happened one after another, both of whom were black and evil figures who could be called local snakes in Oaktown. This made me keenly aware that Alan's murder was not as simple as it appeared on the surface. Perhaps there is a hidden conspiracy here that has yet to surface. Perhaps from the moment the state police decided to set up a special operation, our every move was being watched by the mastermind behind it. Who could it be? David Brown, the police chief of Oaktown, or Kevin Johnson, who seems to be able to do everything, or Alan Ryan, who escaped by faking his death, or is the entire Oaktown government involved? The more I thought about it, the more I got a headache. As the head of the State Police Serious Crime Unit, the superior judicial organ of the Oaktown Police Station, I also have some understanding of Oaktown's reputation. Oaktown is a town with the highest crime rate in the entire state of Grant, and even the whole country. And Oaktown also bears the title of three most, the largest population, the worst security, and the most economically backward. However, in just 20 years, this small town, with a reputation of being the three most, has changed 9 mayors, and hundreds of officials have ruined their political careers due to corruption crimes. There is even a jingle circulating within the system, Oak Tree 3 years, without a fixed term. It means no matter how honest and diligent an official is, after working in Oaktown for less than 3 years, he will be corrupted, and the life sentence is considered light. Although the crackdown on corruption has intensified in recent years, and the nationwide crackdown on gangsters and evil forces has stabilized Oaktown a lot. However, for those black and evil forces that are deeply entrenched in Oaktown, it cannot be eradicated overnight. Otherwise, the state government and the state police would not have launched a special operation to take advantage of Alan's death to carry out another major cleanup in Oaktown. But is it really that easy? As soon as our operation started, the main suspects died one after another. I believe, even more, that those umbrellas that have long been corrupted will definitely not stop there in order to confront the investigation and erase evidence. Therefore, the deaths of Oliver Gordon and Samuel White are just the beginning, and there will definitely be more accidents in the future. Just who will be the next one to die? Late at night, I fell asleep with a stomach full of doubts. I don't know how long I slept, but I was awakened by a knock on the door in my sleep. Bang, 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 bang. In the dead of night, the sound of glass being tapped was particularly piercing. I followed the sound and instantly broke out in a cold sweat, and I was completely awake. Glass, glass. Through the curtains, I could vaguely see a dark figure knocking on the glass outside the window. This is the 8th floor. Who? I plucked up the courage to shout, and at the same time touched the gun under the pillow. The cold gun in my hand gave me some courage. But before I could walk to the window, the black shadow had disappeared. Opening the curtains, there was nothing outside, and there was no shadow. Just as I was about to poke my head out to look for it, a familiar voice suddenly came from my ear. West Suburb, Animal Shelter. Hearing the sound, I broke out in a cold sweat again. Alan. It was Alan's voice. Alan, is that you? I hastily stuck my head out of the window and searched up and down, but I couldn't find Alan. At this moment, I didn't care whether there were ghosts or not, so I rushed out of the door and went straight to the roof of the hotel. But when I got to the rooftop, I found that the door to the rooftop was locked from the inside. After I found the hotel staff to show my ID and ask to open the door to the rooftop, I was surprised to find that the entire rooftop was empty, and it was far away from other buildings around. This also meant that it was impossible for anyone to escape from the roof, maybe hiding in another room. I immediately called Lucas and notified everyone to gather. More than a dozen police officers who came to work with me from the state police station quickly gathered, checked the entire hotel, and after carefully checking the surveillance cameras at the entrance and exit of the hotel, I was dumbfounded. Inspector, she mistaken. Lucas was also frightened by my experience. His face was a little pale. After all, Who would believe that a dead person can still appear in a hotel in the middle of the night? George stroked his chin and smacked his lips. Inspector, are you sure you heard Alan's voice? Nonsense. I've been friends with Alan for more than 10 years. Can I hear it wrong? I ran into Alan one after another, even though I suspected that he was faking his death. This experience was too scary. I clearly saw him and heard his voice, but I couldn't find him. George clapped his hands together, then go to the western suburbs and have a look. No matter if he is a human or a ghost since he set the place, let's go and see. That's right, go and have a look. Lucas also took a deep breath, pretending to be relaxed. Maybe we'll find something, and the case will be over, so we can go back sooner. I looked at the sky outside, and then at my watch. 5 in the morning. It's winter now, and it's more than 2 hours before dawn. But what happened just now made me unable to stay for a moment. I also wanted to see what was in the west suburb animal shelter that Alan was talking about. Let's go to the animal shelter. After asking the hotel manager for the specific location of the animal shelter, a dozen of us drove police cars to the western suburbs of Oaktown in the dark. According to the hotel manager, the animal shelter in the western suburbs of Oaktown is a large-scale factory integrating the breeding of meat dogs, the collection of stray dogs slaughtering, and processing. There are thousands of dogs raised in it, all year round. Even when there are guests who need dog meat in their hotel, they will order from the shelter. The owner of the shelter is named Bonnie Rose, nicknamed Father Rose, who has a big business. The dog meat inside is not only sold locally, but also sold to other provinces. I'm familiar with Oaktown's reputation, and I know that those who can do big business in Oaktown must have started out in gangs in the early years. Otherwise, they would never be able to gain a foothold in this mixed town. Now that Alan has given a hint, there must be something wrong with this animal shelter. As for what the problem is, I can only find it slowly. It was already daylight when we arrived at the animal shelter. Before the car approached, I heard deafening barks one after another. When we knocked on the door of the animal shelter, the old man guarding the door showed a look of fear when he saw the police uniforms on us. "Officers, what's the matter?" The old man held a rubber stick, tremblingly, his tone unnatural. "Surprise inspection. Surprise inspection." George stepped forward, first grabbed the old man's arm with one hand, ready to subdue him at any time. The old man was even more frightened. Check what I want to call my boss." "No trouble, Lucas. Take some people in and have a look." Extraordinary times. Extraordinary means I don't care about any search warrant. After all, we just took a look, and even if we complained, we could use the excuse of suspecting that the suspect was hiding inside to prevaricate. Lucas immediately rushed in with his men. About half an hour later, Lucas came out and shook his head at me. Shouldn't it be? Alan appeared in front of me in the middle of the night and asked me to come to the west suburb animal shelter. How could I find nothing? I looked at the dogs gathered under the tin shed, pacing back and forth anxiously, thinking about asking something, when I accidentally saw a dog eating. A flash of inspiration suddenly flashed in my mind. "Where is your feed processing workshop?" I rushed over and grabbed the old man guarding the door. The old man was startled and hurriedly pointed to a tin house not far to the north. "Give me the key." I grabbed the key, rushed to the feed room quickly, opened the iron door, and what came into view was a large meat grinder. The ground around was covered with blood and a stench. Lucas notified Doctor. By the way, call Kevin and ask him to come here too. Before coming here, a voice suspected to be Alan told me to go to the West Suburb Animal Shelter. I believe he would not let me come here for no reason. And since Alan was killed, his body has never been found. Now the meat grinder in front of me seems to be telling me something. Perhaps Alan is really dead, and his body was sent to the meat grinder in the animal shelter after his death, ground to a pulp and eaten by the dogs. Only in this way can be explained why Alan's body was not found everywhere. But Alan, is he really dead? But Alan, is he really dead? I suspected Alan was not dead when Samuel White's body was found. Because ghosts don't kill people in human ways. Only those who pretend to be ghosts will use such means to destroy evidence. And just now, although Alan did not show up, his voice appeared strangely outside the window of the hotel and informed me to go to the West Suburb Animal Shelter. What was his purpose in getting me here? Prove he's dead? Or to dispel my doubts and make me think he is dead? I stood by the meat grinder, pacing back and forth, anxiously, waiting for the final answer. Until Benjamin arrived, carefully extracted various samples from the inner wall, outer skin of the meat grinder, and the bloodstains on the ground. He breathed a sigh of relief, because I feel that the answer is not far away. After Benjamin left, Kevin also arrived, late in his Ford pickup. From a distance, there was a modified Hummer behind him. After Kevin got out of the car, he didn't come over immediately, but waited for a while until the middle-aged man in the Hummer behind got out of the car, and the two walked over side by side. Inspector Williams, let me introduce you. This is Barney. Before Kevin finished speaking, I waved my hand. No need. Detective Johnson, I have something else to do. Please take him to the police station to record his statement. When Dr. Benjamin's results come out, maybe we should have a good talk. Speaking, I turned to Lucas and said, Lucas, you take a few people to stay here and guard. Sometimes, things are so amazing, the more you are afraid of something, the more it will come. 3 hours after I returned to the Oaktown police station, Benjamin came in with a report, still with the lukewarm look. Inspector Williams, after verifying the meat scraps, bone scraps remaining on the inner wall of the meat grinder, and the extracts from the dirt on the ground, it proves that the DNA inside matches Detective Inspector Allen. Detective Inspector Allen should have already. Benjamin didn't go on. But even if he didn't say it, I understood. Alan's DNA was detected in the extracts from the meat grinder, which means that Alan, at least some parts of Alan's body, had been in the meat grinder. He might be dead. Of course, it is not ruled out that this is another trap set by Alan in order to fake his death, in order to give misleading information and dispel the doubts in my heart. I rubbed my temples. The migraine caused by long-term lack of sleep made me feel a little uncomfortable. When the pain subsided, I looked up and asked, have the time and cause of death of Oliver Gordon and Samuel White been determined? Benjamin nodded. It has been determined. Oliver Gordon's death. Samuel White's death was at 5:00 p.m., the day before yesterday. Between 00 and 7:00, the cause of death was drowning. 3 days ago, the day before yesterday. In other words, Samuel White died the day before Oliver Gordon was killed, which was also the day the Oaktown Police Department discovered Alan's murder. They died one after another, and it happened to be the day of Alan's 7th day that the first murder happened. Is it such coincidence? I waved my hand and asked Benjamin to go out first, while I closed my eyes and sorted out the timeline in my mind. According to the report submitted by the Oaktown Police Department, they received a call from Alan's neighbor 3 days ago, broke into the door, and found the scene of Alan's murder. After technical identification, Alan died 7 days ago. And just between 5:00 p.m. and 7:00 p.m. that day, Samuel White was killed, and his body was dumped into the bottom of the river, followed by the mysterious death of Oliver Gordon at home the next day. 3 murders linked people who had grudges, which is undoubtedly the biggest now. And the deaths of Oliver Gordon and Samuel White were different. Perhaps the murderer was in a hurry to get rid of Samuel White when he committed the crime for the first time, and he didn't expect that Samuel White's body would be found so quickly. As for the second crime, using the method of pretending to be a ghost to scare Oliver Gordon to death, it may be to divert attention and attribute Oliver Gordon's death to the revenge of the evil spirit. Perhaps he will use this trick again in his next crime. But Samuel White's body was found. The first deceased died of suffocation after being packed in an iron net and sunk into the river. This just shows that the murderer who committed the crime was a human, not an evil spirit. So the next thing to do is to determine whether Alan is alive or dead. If Alan is really dead, the murderer is someone else, and the investigation will be carried out directly from the case Alan investigated before his death. If Alan is not dead, then it will be much easier. Just apply for an arrest warrant. Arrest Alan can bring him to justice, and all doubts will be solved. Thinking of this, I immediately called Lucas. Lucas carefully checked the animal shelter and find out all the people who have entered and left the shelter in the past 3 days. After hanging up the phone, I went to the interrogation room again. Alan's body was chopped into meat paste and fed to the dogs, right? I would like to ask, who turned on the meat grinder? It is an undeniable fact that Alan's DNA was detected in the meat scraps remaining in the meat grinder at the animal shelter. However, what is surprising is that, in the face of ironclad evidence, Barney Rose is actually innocent. He had no idea about Alan's body being stuffed into a meat grinder. It was the old security guard who really knew the inside story. In the interrogation room, as soon as the evidence was presented, without our trial, the old security guard, Sam, confessed everything. I said, "Officer, I confess everything." Seeing that the matter had been exposed, old Sam was so frightened that he burst into tears and said, "A few nights ago, a young man sneaked a duffel bag to the animal shelter, saying it was the pig died at home, and I want to use our meat grinder to grind it up." "Why do you want to use a meat grinder to grind up a dead pig?" I asked sharply. Old Sam said with a crying voice, "I could tell it wasn't a pig at the time. I could smell a pungent smell of blood from afar. It was the smell of human blood." "Then why didn't you call the police?" "He gave me $2,000. Old Sam wailed and confessed. "I worked as a night watchman at an animal shelter for only $2,000 a month. $2,000 is more than half a year's salary for me. I thought I could get $2,000 in 10 minutes. And as long as I don't tell, he doesn't tell, no one will know. So you watched him put the man in the meat grinder for $2,000. I gritted my teeth in anger. It was a human being, not some cat or dog. Old Sam beat his chest and burst into tears. I'm not human. I'm a beast. Officer, I was blinded by money. Please forgive me for my age, just spare me this time. If it wasn't for my unpromising son and my 2 grandsons going to school, I wouldn't have the conscience to covet the $2,000. Old Sam cried heart-piercingly, begging for mercy, and told the plight of his family. For this kind of elderly and illiterate old man, I don't know whether to cry or laugh for a while. Although I feel sorry for old Sam from the bottom of my heart, I am a policeman. As a people's policeman, the first priority is to enforce the law impartially. The criminals, no matter what the reason for their violation of the law, as long as they violate the law, they must bear the corresponding consequences. After the interrogation, I asked Lucas to bring the computer and made a portrait of the character based on old Sam's description. It wasn't until the afternoon that the puzzle came out, and I took the puzzle to Kevin. Kevin recognized the suspect in the portrait after just one glance. Isn't this Nick? Nick? Who's Nick? I asked. Kevin explained Nick Hall, nicknamed Little Five, was a thug under Samuel White before. He went in a few years ago for intentional injury, and he was released 2 months ago. After he came out, he's still doing security work at Silver Moon Finance, Samuel White's subordinate. I frowned upon hearing that, because since we stepped into Oaktown and started working, Kevin has been advocating that Alan and Samuel White are colluding. Judging from the cases Alan handled before his death, it basically proved this point from the side. Assuming that there is really some kind of interest relationship between Alan and Samuel White, why did Nick Hall, as Samuel White's subordinate, attack Alan? Intentional homicide and insulting the corpse are much more serious crimes than intentional injury. What kind of interest drives Samuel White to get rid of Alan? The more I thought about it, the more strange it became. I always felt that there was some misleading factor in this seemingly logical and very intuitive evidence. First of all, why did Samuel White order Nicole to kill Alan? Before Alan was suspended, he had been investigating Golden Lion Finance, which was equivalent to indirectly helping Silver Moon Finance, and there was no conflict of interest. Secondly, Alan was not found dead until 7 days later, and Nick Hall had enough time to dispose of the body. Sinking into the river, burning, dismembering, and abandoning are all methods that can hide clues to a certain extent. There are so many ways to destroy corpses and destroy traces. Why did Nick Hall take the risk of being identified and choose to put Alan's body into a meat grinder? This is unreasonable. Just as I was deep in thought, Kevin pushed me. Inspector Williams, do you want to arrest Nick Hall? Well, search the whole town. Search the whole town. Shh. Arrest Nick Hall as soon as possible. Kevin immediately walked towards the office to convey the order to various departments of the Oaktown police station. Meanwhile, we're not sitting idle, either. I first asked Lucas to take someone to escort old Sam to identify the scene, and then found $2,000 wrapped in newspaper and hidden in the rice field in his house to supplement the evidence. George was arranged to investigate the people Alan had contacted before his death, as well as surveillance cameras near his home to find evidence of Nick Hall's entry and murder. It wasn't until it was almost time to get off work in the evening that Kevin walked in with an anxious expression on his face. "Inspector Williams, Nick Hall is dead." "Dead again?" I stood up angrily. "Good guy, this is a blatant confrontation and obstruction of investigation." As soon as the important breakthrough point of the case was found, the murderer was eliminated, which clearly showed the confrontation. I roared furiously, "How did he die?" "Armed resisting arrest," Kevin explained with a ashamed face after I issued the mission in the afternoon. I located Nick Hall hiding in his hometown through the itinerary code. So I notified the nearby patrol police to carry out the arrest mission. But I didn't want him to. He shot the patrolman with a shotgun. The patrolman handling the case had no choice but to shoot back. Nick Hall was shot 6 times and died on the spot. What a good thing you did." I was so angry that my face turned blue, but I couldn't find a reason to scold him. According to the system, during the process of arresting criminal suspects, if the police encounter stubborn resistance from the other party, they can completely shoot and kill the criminal suspect if there is no condition to capture them alive and to ensure their own safety. But there was definitely something wrong with Nick Hall's death. Because when Kevin discovered the criminal suspect, he didn't report it, but directly notified his subordinate patrol police to arrest him, which was against the regulations. But Nick Hall is dead now. What can I do? Even if I reported it, Kevin would be able to shirk all responsibility, saying that it was his subordinates who were eager to take credit. Damn it. I want to curse. Really? Now, I seriously suspect that none of the police in Oaktown is clean. Otherwise, they wouldn't make things difficult for us everywhere. But is it useful to swear? If swearing can solve the case and wipe out the evil forces in Oaktown and the umbrellas behind them, I would rather be scolded to death. I panted heavily, suppressing the anger in my heart. Since the person is dead, please ask Detective Johnson to inform all the police officers involved in the arrest of Nick Hall to gather at the police station tomorrow. I knew very well that if Nick Hall's death was really designed by someone, even if all the police officers involved in the case were questioned, the result would only be a pre-rehearsed result. But I just wanted to see how muddy the water in Oaktown is, and whether it is, as I guessed, the entire Oaktown Police Department has been corrupted and infiltrated, and can do things that violate principles and party spirit for the sake of money. That night, I drove back to the state police station overnight. After a 2-hour conversation with the director, I hurried back to Oaktown, and things turned out exactly as I expected. Regarding the Nick Hall resisting arrest and being shot dead, I had separate conversations with more than a dozen police officers who participated in the operation, and the answers I got were like the lines of a pre-written script. We found Nick Hall hiding at home. He was discovered while setting up checkpoints. Nick Hall shot our captain several times with a shotgun, and we were forced to return fire. Nick Hall was shot 6 times and died on the spot. Everyone's confessions were consistent. There was no discrepancy, and there was no mention of why they were arrested without authorization, which clearly meant that they had rehearsed in advance to confront the investigation. Looking at the dozen or so confession reports, I couldn't help laughing. You think I'm a fool, and I don't have to be polite to you. So I announced in public that everyone would stay in the serious crime unit for the time being, waiting for further verification of the incident, and not allowed to go out during this period. Faced with this result, the police officers of the Oaktown Police Department collectively protested, and even Kevin stood up to smooth things over. "Inspector Williams, you are doing this against the rules." They acted according to the rules, and no one wanted an accident. Moreover, there are still many security cases in Oaktown that need to be dealt with, so it's not good not to let them go back. I sneered and said, "Don't worry, Detective Johnson. Someone will take care of things in Oaktown. I have applied to the state police for police from other places. Would you this? Is it necessary?" Hearing the words, "police from other places," Kevin's expression changed slightly, and he became anxious. I didn't talk nonsense with him and winked at Lucas and George. Lucas and George, who had been notified long ago, immediately stepped forward. "Detective Johnson, according to the order of the state police, during the verification period, all police officers, including you and the Oaktown Police Department, will remain silent on the spot and wait for the results of the investigation. Please." The two took Kevin by the left and right arms and walked towards the office. Kevin looked at me with anger, but I can't control that much. The water in Oaktown is too deep and muddy. Facing our supervision and handling of the case, from the serious crime team to the grassroots police officers, they are all full of resistance, which has brought great difficulties to our work. To completely clear the obstacles, we must use police from other places. Police from other places means exactly what it says. Local police forces are no longer trusted, and only police forces from other places can be used to handle local cases. Mostly used for handling major cases, carrying out special governance, strictly investigating illegal vehicles, and combating gangs and evil forces. Moreover, police from other places has especially in places where local protectionism is serious, especially in cases involving local leaders, the effect of police officers from other places is even more significant. At present, this is the situation in Oaktown. Various forces in the local area are intertwined, and the situation is complicated. If the local police force is used to handle the case, I'm afraid that no clues will be found in 10 or 8 years. 12 noon. As the first batch of police officers transferred from the state police station gathered at the Oaktown police station, more than 200 police officers from various counties were quickly assigned to their respective posts. Duty monitoring, sorting out Oaktown, the police station handles case files, and so on. As the saying goes, many people make light work with the joint efforts of more than 200 police officers from other places. It took only one afternoon to sort out hundreds of violent debt collection cases involving Golden Lion Finance Company and Silver Moon Finance Company in the past. I don't know if I don't check it, but I'm startled when I check it. This year alone, Golden Lion Finance Company has had more than 30 criminal cases caused by violent debt collection, 4 of which resulted in deaths. But in the handling results of the OC station, most of them were characterized as gang fights, accidental injuries, and traffic accidents. In the office, Lucas held the compiled report and said indignantly, "The bastards in Oaktown have really disgraced our police officers. As police officers, they took the initiative to act as umbrellas for evil forces. This time, we must be sure to uproot them." I sighed and shook my head silently. Yes, judging from the previous files alone, it is not difficult to find that the police officers in Oaktown have long been involved in legal and disciplinary acts, such as covering up prostitution and gambling and bending the law for personal gain. But there are too many police officers involved. The most important thing is, what is the motivation? Can they be convicted based solely on cases they have handled in the past? Obviously not possible. After all, they are also from the police force and are familiar with the law. When they are live in court, they collectively retract their confessions, saying that due to the large number of cases and insufficient manpower, some negligence is inevitable, and I am afraid that at least half of them will escape legal sanctions. The special operation established by the state government and the state police this time is to crack down on organized criminal activities in Oaktown, as well as violations of regulations and disciplines, and acts of protection within the system. If it is only to punish some people and let some escape punishment, then this special operation is incomplete and cannot achieve a complete victory. I rubbed my temples and asked George, who was beside me, "Have you got any results on what I asked you to investigate?" As early as noon, when the police force from other places, mobilized by the state police station, arrived, I assigned George, who is proficient in computers, a separate and important task to investigate the source and whereabouts of funds for Golden Lion Finance and Silver Moon Finance. Because since seeing Kevin's Ford pickup last night, I suspected that some police officers in Oaktown might have some kind of interest relationship with the local usury lending company, secretly colluding and engaging in power money transactions. Otherwise, if there is no interest drive, no one would risk losing their official position and going to jail to do illegal and disciplinary things. It's just that I still need more intuitive and conclusive evidence. Disappointingly, George closed the computer dejectedly. Silver Moon Finance is easy to check traditional business methods, emergency loans, high interest lending, and the accounts are clear at a glance. But Golden Lion Finance's accounts are a bit difficult to handle. So far, I have only found out that Golden Lion Finance there will be a large-scale cash deposit on the first of each month and a cash outflow from time to time. Because all cash flows are used, the source and whereabouts of the money are unknown. Mainly, what about the bank? Can you find any clues through the bank flow? George shook his head. It's probably difficult. Oaktown is a big town with a terrifying amount of bank flow deposited and withdrawn every day. Who took the money? Who deposited the money? What was it used for? This is not 1 or 2 days. Things that can be investigated. Lucas shouted, "Just grab Golden Lion's accountant and ask." George said after Oliver, Gordon, and Samuel White died, I asked someone to summon the main persons in charge of the 2 financial companies. But they all said that only the boss knew about the flow of company profits. Incatense. This answer, after hearing it, is a pointer from a high-ranking person. Throwing all the blame on the 2 dead people can not only minimize their own penalties, but also make our investigation more difficult to a certain extent. It seems that the development of the matter is as I expected. Someone wants to use the lives of Oliver Gordon and Samuel White to cover up the crime of acting as an umbrella. They seemed convinced that as long as Samuel White and Oliver Gordon died, we would never find out the truth. Seeing that it was already dark outside, I got up and picked up my coat. Okay, I've been busy for 2 days. Let's stop here. Today go back and have a good rest. I haven't had a good rest for several days, and I am tired too. I drove all the way to the hotel, parked the car in the underground parking lot, and was about to get out of the car when the harsh radar alarm sounded again. Beep, 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 beep. Late night, underground parking lot, radar confirmation of Alan's death. A series of thoughts flashed through my mind, and I instantly broke out in a cold sweat and looked at the central control screen. It was still the radar alarm on the right side of the vehicle, and it still showed a human figure. I looked to the right tremblingly, but apart from a parked car, there were no pedestrians. Alan, is that you? I took out the cross pendant my wife gave me from the pocket of my jacket, clenched it tightly in my hand, and at the same time summoned up the courage to shout, Alan, I am also a policeman. Don't worry if you were really wronged. I will definitely avenge you. But it's wrong for you to scare me like this, every now and then. However, there was no response. On the central control screen, the radar alarm was still beeping, indicating that the humanoid creature slowly squatted on the ground, and after a while, it disappeared out of thin air. Futile. Hearing the disappearance of the radar alarm, I let out a long breath, got out of the car tremblingly, and walked towards the right side of the vehicle involuntarily. Nobody. Just as I was about to leave, I inadvertently glanced at the ground. If you don't look at it, it's okay. But when you look at it, you will instantly feel your scalp tingling and your hairs stand on end. Damn it. On the concrete floor, 2 scarlet characters were written in blood vests. The mold. What victims? I tried to calm down the fear in my heart, stared at the 2 blood words on the ground, and racked my brains to recall. This was the 4th time I had bumped into Alan. The first time he was smoking in the underground parking lot of the state police station and beckoned to me. The second time when I left the state police station and went home, he wanted to open the co-pilot's door to get in the car. The third time, the black shadow outside the window, the night before yesterday, told me West Suburb Animal Shelter. This time, he wrote the word vase. Could it be hinting at something again? Could it be that before he died, he hid the evidence in a vase? But where is this vase? I thought for a while before picking up my phone and calling Lucas. Lucas told the colleagues from the forensic department to come here with their tools. And in the hotel's underground parking lot, after hanging up the phone, I stayed by the parking space, staring at the 2 blood words on the ground. A strange feeling came to my heart, but I couldn't be sure. Until half an hour later, colleagues from the forensic department arrived, collected the blood stains on the ground, and launched an investigation around. Lucas asked quietly, Inspector, did you run into Alan again? Lucas was full of horror when he said this, because since Alan's DNA sample was detected in the meat grinder at the West Suburb Animal Shelter, Alan's death has been confirmed. Now that Alan appeared again, even the People's Police were afraid. We are the People's Police, so we catch people. As for ghosts, which are beyond the scope of our authority and cognition, it is no wonder that we are not afraid. I didn't answer, just smoked silently. Just like that. We waited for another 2 hours until the colleague from the forensic department came over with the result. Inspector Williams, after preliminary inspection, the bloodstains on the ground matched Detective Inspector Allen. After our inspection of the surrounding ground and the parking lot surveillance, no suspicious points were found. These 2 words, The little police officer, Mike, looked at me timidly, but didn't continue. Lucas's face was even paler, and he looked around nervously, as if he was worried that Alan would appear at any time. I threw away the cigarette, but in my hand, and waved, "Let's go to Alan's house." Now, Lucas was a little scared. "So many of us. What are you afraid of?" I led everyone straight to Alan's house. However, no vases were found at Alan's house. So we rushed to the Oaktown police station in a hurry, smashed all the vases in the police station, and still couldn't find the so-called clue. Seeing that it was about to dawn, after running around all night, we all had exhaustion on our faces. Just as I was thinking about whether to continue looking for clues about the vase, a young police officer from the state police station suddenly shouted, "Inspector, could vase be a painting?" Painting? I was taken aback. The young police officer pretended to recall. "I remember that when I was sorting our files in the archives yesterday, I saw a painting with a vase on it." Hearing this, I turned my head and rushed to the archives, and sure enough, I found a painting pasted on the wall. The painting is a printed painting that can be seen everywhere on the street. The picture is yellowed, and it looks like an old painting at first glance. After careful observation, I found that the tape around the painting is relatively new, which is out of tune with the whole old painting. After I carefully took down the whole painting, I found that the back of the canvas was covered with dense handwriting. Vista for the thin. After reading what was written on the back of the picture, I couldn't even breathe. The police officers who followed me in were all surprised. "Inspector Williams, what's the matter? Are there any clues?" "Inspector, why don't you speak?" Faced with their urging, I took a deep breath, then carefully rolled up the painting, drove the others out, and only left George behind. "George, you can find out all the salary income and expenditure flow of all personnel in the Oaktown government system. Remember, this matter must be investigated secretly. Everyone, isn't this a bit irregular?" "Investigate first. I'll go to the state police." I was also apprehensive, because the content written on the back of the picture scroll by Alan was too terrifying. If it was true, I'm afraid the entire Oaktown would have to be cleared from top to bottom. And I'm just the head of the state police serious crime unit. Even as the person in charge of the special operation of the state government and the state police, if I want to move a small police officer, I can move it. Even the police chief and the mayor can do it by reporting to the state government. But what if this special operation involved the entire Oaktown government? Thousands of people. Most of them are public officials with real power. This is no joke. After a few more instructions to George, I took the scroll out of the door, brought a dozen armed special police officers from other places, and went straight to the state police. And George didn't disappoint me. Finally, 1 minute before I arrived at the state police station, he sent me a preliminary investigation result. Just like that, I went straight to the director's office with the investigation results and the evidence clues written by Alan, as predicted. The director was also shocked by the scope of the case and immediately reported it to the state government, which in turn reported it to the FBI. It wasn't until the next morning that the final decision came down. I waited in the state government's conference room until the director and the governor came over with serious faces. The governor patted me on the shoulder and said solemnly, "Frank, This time we had the support of the FBI, so please go ahead and do it. The director gave me a reassurance. The FBI has decided to draw thousands of police officers from various states, and they will all rush to Oaktown within 2 days. Remember, we are determined to carry out this special operation. Even if we cut off flesh and dig out bones, we must remove all the tumors. We are the people's police and only need to be responsible to the people. Any background is a paper tiger, and it can't stand investigation. Yes, with the guarantee of the governor and the director, I am full of confidence at this moment. I immediately take the latest instructions and go straight to Oaktown. When I arrived, I first interrogated Kevin Johnson, who had been detained for 3 days in an attempt to obtain more favorable evidence before the final execution. Kevin Johnson, we now had sufficient evidence to prove that you are suspected of corruption, bribery, abuse of power for personal gain, and acting as an umbrella. Chinned. Inspector Williams. Wrong, Inspector Williams. Are you mistaken? Kevin argued loudly. But when I threw out the investigation results, Kevin drooped his head instantly and stopped talking. I tapped the investigation report on the table and said coldly, I have to say, you are hiding it very deeply. By supporting Golden Lion Finance Company, you mobilized other public officials to deposit money into Golden Lion Finance in cash, and then use Canto C routine loans, compound interest, and other methods to lend out to the outside world, collecting high interest. You think that all transactions through cash can avoid illegal income from being investigated, but you forgot that the income and expenditure of public officials do not match, and it can also be investigated. What era is it now? In the era of big data cloud, even if all you use is cash, it can still be found out. I stared at Kevin coldly, secretly feeling lucky. Seriously, if Alan hadn't written down the entire operation load of Golden Lion Finance, I wouldn't have thought of investigating in reverse. At the beginning, George found out that Golden Lion Finance had a large amount of cash of unknown origin deposited into the account every month, and cash flowed out from time to time. But no one knows how so much cash came from, where it went, until the discovery of Alan's whistleblower letter. It turns out that the so-called Golden Lion Finance Company is basically a money-making institution established by the internal government of Oaktown. Oliver Gordon was just the boss on the surface, and it was the entire Oaktown government that was really manipulating everything behind the scenes. In order to obtain high profits and stable development, they directly pulled the leaders of various departments into the water to participate in shares, and lured grassroots civil servants to join. After receiving their salary every month, they withdraw the salary and deposit it into Golden Lion Finance in cash, and withdraw it whenever needed. The interest offered is several times that of banks. Who wouldn't be tempted by the high interest? More and more civil servants joined in, which also led to Golden Lion Finance getting the green light wherever it went. With more and more funds, more and more loan contracts, Golden Lion Finance has risen rapidly. And all of this also led to the decline in performance of Silver Moon Finance, which was established earlier in Oaktown. Samuel White was a local snake in Oaktown in his early years. Later, after he laundered his money by opening a financial company, he also took care of leaders from all sides. But he overlooked one point. Once a person's greed starts, his appetite is insatiable. Therefore, after more civil servants tasted the sweetness, they were no longer satisfied with Samuel White's little care during the holidays. But Samuel White had evidence of their bribery in his hands, so they didn't dare to touch Samuel White easily. So they came up with a plan to kill with a borrowed knife. Through the rise of Golden Lion finance, Samuel White's dissatisfaction was aroused. Kevin was then instructed to secretly instigate and lure Samuel White to force Alan to investigate Golden Lion finance. This move seems to be asking for trouble for himself, but it can precisely eliminate the two unstable factors of Alan and Samuel White. Because Alan was not only Samuel White's neighbor, but he also received huge bribes from Samuel White all the year round, and he was unwilling to join the Golden Lion finance plan. In this way, Samuel White used the evidence of Alan's bribery to threaten Alan to investigate Golden Lion finance, intending to destroy the other party. In the end, an unexpected car accident claimed the lives of Alan's wife and daughter, and pressure from all sides made Alan mistakenly believe that Samuel White did it, so that the two would fight each other and end up hurting both sides. But they didn't expect that. Although Alan was stubborn, he was not stupid. After realizing the abnormality of the whole incident, Alan not only did not shoot Samuel White in anger, but kept complaining to his superiors, intending to expose the truth of Golden Lion finance. In the end, things got worse and worse. Seeing that they couldn't be suppressed, the idea of getting rid of Alan came into being. Let Alan be suspended, appease Samuel White, and then make a promise that as long as Samuel White kills Alan, the past will be forgotten. But they didn't expect that Alan's death directly alarmed the state government and the state police, and a special operation was set up to crack down on the evil forces in Oaktown. After receiving the news, David Brown immediately cut his wrists and decided to get rid of Oliver Gordon and Samuel White to confront the investigation. I slapped the table vigorously. "You have done such crazy things for the sake of money. How dare you wear the police uniform on your body?" Kevin laughed. He smiled sadly. "Since it's all found out, I have nothing to argue about. But Inspector Williams, do you think we want this? Oaktown is a poor town. Coupled with the epidemic in recent years, do you know how many grassroots employees can't get their salaries? We have families too. We have to support our families. Originally, I could still get a salary of several thousand in a month. But now, the town has no money. Last year's one-time performance was cancelled. The salary has only been paid the basic salary for half a year. Just those 2,000 or 3,000 here tell me how to support a family. Who doesn't have a few old people and children? Who doesn't have a time when they are sick or in trouble? If we didn't need money, would we take the risk? Yes, according to laws and regulations, we were wrong. But for the sake of thousands of grassroots brothers, are we wrong? Brothers work day and night to maintain law and order and solve problems for the people, but we are not made of iron. We also need to eat, drink, and have parents and children to support. I arranged for someone to kill Oliver Gordon, and he died from an overdose of drugs. The autopsy report, I also asked Dr. Benjamin to do tricks, but Samuel White's death definitely has nothing to do with us. What? I was startled and was about to ask again, when I saw Kevin suddenly took off the cross pendant from his neck, turned the pendant quickly, took out something inside and swallowed it. Call 911, Kevin Johnson is poisoned. I hurriedly greeted outside, feeling extremely self-blame in my heart. It was all my negligence. I didn't expect Kevin to commit suicide. Moreover, because the official notification from above has not come down, Kevin is still the detective inspector of the Oaktown police station and is waiting for investigation, so his belongings have not been searched. But who would have thought he would carry deadly poison with him? Kevin still died in the hospital, identified by a forensic doctor, transferred from the state police. He took a nerve poison that could kill within 2 minutes. But on the day Kevin died, David Brown, who had been using the excuse of going to the state capitol for a meeting, appeared at the FBI and confessed all his crimes. With David Brown's confession, a thunderbolt operation against Oaktown officially kicked off, from the leading group of the town government to the grassroots police officers and personnel of various departments and enterprises. The police from other places dispatched to arrest people totaled tens of thousands. And all I have to do is to watch police cars escorting suspects whizzing by on the streets of Oaktown every day and preside over the roundup work after the major cleanup. Until 2 months later, I suddenly remembered something and immediately drove to the detention center to find the old security guard Sam from the animal shelter. Were you there when Nick Hall was grinding the body? No, I was scared, so I hid outside. How big is the duffel bag he brought? It's about this big. After old Sam gestured a few times as if remembering something, he muttered. When he went in, he lifted the canvas bag with one hand. The body shouldn't be so light. Huh. I was taken aback for a moment and immediately realized it. Yes. Only in this way can all the doubts be perfectly explained and the whole case can be connected together. There are no ghosts in this world. If there are any, it must be Alan who is playing tricks. Alan is not dead. He must still be alive. After figuring out the cause and effect of the whole incident, I walked out of the detention center, got into the car, silently lit a cigarette, and struggled with my thoughts. In the end, reason and the justice in my heart triumphed over everything. I picked up my phone and edited a message. Old friend, I know you're still alive. Come out and meet. Red Maple Lake. I'll be waiting for you there. Afterwards, I drove to Red Maple Lake and waited silently. Midnight. Just as I was feeling sleepy, a familiar figure appeared by the lake. This time, I was not afraid, but calmly got out of the car and looked at Alan, not far away. You're here. I'm here. You know, I will arrest you when you come. I know. Then you still dare to come. Now, legally you are already a dead person. If you don't show up, you can hide forever. But I am also a policeman. If I make a mistake, I should be punished. Alan touched his stubble chin with his only right hand and suddenly showed a playful expression. I didn't scare you too much a few days ago, did I? Go away. It almost scared the shit out of me. I went over and punched Alan, then handed him a cigarette. When I saw his empty left sleeve, I felt inexplicably sad and asked, is it worth it? There is no such thing as worth it, only willing or not. In this world, there are always some things that need a fool to do, right? Alan took the cigarette and took a deep breath, then walked straight into the car. When he sat in the co-pilot seat, seeing that I was still outside, he couldn't help but stick his head out to urge, "Let's go after you've interrogated me. You can go back early." This Oaktown special operation was done beautifully. You will be promoted when you go back. Next life, you have to thank me. After speaking, Alan said self-deprecatingly, "Unlike me, after half a lifetime, I am just a small-town detective inspector." Hey, I'm not even a detective inspector now. After I brought Alan back, considering the relationship between us, I took the initiative to apply for recusal and did not participate in Alan's interrogation. Later, George, who participated in the interrogation, told me that Alan confessed everything and took the initiative to explain the process of his crime. According to Alan's confession, he did receive a huge bribe from Samuel White, and at the juncture of life and death, he used the money to bribe Nick Hall, who came to kill him. After all, Nick Hall was just a thug, and he didn't want to bear the crime of killing a policeman. Therefore, after getting the money from Alan, Nick Hall chose to do what Alan told him to do. The finger on the table was deliberately dropped by Alan. It was also Alan's instruction to go to the animal shelter in the middle of the night to grind up his severed left arm. And Alan's purpose in doing all this was simply to make everyone relax their vigilance and think he was dead. As for the problem with my car's radar alarm, after Alan explained it, I couldn't help but laugh. Sure enough, you can't buy cars from the internet. Through technical means, you can remotely control the car to randomly display some things. And I forgot all about these at the time, because I was frightened. And the two spiritual experiences that directly led to a breakthrough in the case were even simpler. The knocking outside the window was caused by Alan hitting the glass with a drone. The blood wards on the ground were caused by a remote-controlled car. After the dust settled, I went to the prison to visit Alan once. When I asked him why he had to pretend to be a ghost instead of standing up and reporting the crime, Alan smiled faintly. "Stand up and report. It's not that I haven't done it, but does anyone believe it? I'm pretending to be a ghost and scaring people. Do you think I just scared you?" "What do you mean?" I asked hastily. Alan smiled mysteriously. "Why do you think the state government is so eager to launch a special operation? Is it really because a small-town policeman was killed? There are so many police officers who die on duty every year. Why didn't their deaths attract the attention of the superiors? But my death can bring an unprecedented storm to the entire Oaktown." I instantly understood what Alan meant. His death was strange, and it involved gang vendetta, which naturally attracted the attention of the media. Oaktown's previous poor reputation will further amplify this police killing case. The state government will definitely conduct a thorough investigation on Oaktown in order to quell public pressure and maintain its own image. And this is exactly what Alan wants. A policeman who did not hesitate to break his own arm, even risk breaking the law in order to uphold justice. Perhaps this is the real Alan Ryan. Looking at Alan's receding back, I couldn't help feeling a lot of emotion. The storm in Oaktown eventually swept the entire state of Grant. Dozens of high-ranking officials were dismissed, hundreds of public officials were sentenced, and the once rampant gangster forces were uprooted. And the starting point of all this was a carefully planned police killing case. I will never forget what Alan said to me at the end. "There are always things in this world that require a fool to do,